Welcome back, everyone, to the second lecture of today on malware analysis and zero trust and kernel level. We have the honor to have with us Mr. Chandra Sakara Reddy, who is interested in cybersecurity research and education. His experience includes information network security, exploited malware research, wireless security, web security, email security, cyber forensics, and compliance. Mr. Chandra finished his graduation from Beats Plan in 2001. And he educates government officials, college students, and various corporate technical analysts on latest security concepts and helps them in dealing with day-to-day challenges in information and infrastructure security, along with system administration troubleshooting. Mr. Chandra, I have to mention, has more than 19 years of experience in corporate industry, where he was involved in various critical project executions, and his latest cybersecurity startup, Cognor, which specializes in making critical systems completely unhackable by any external and internal threats. After 1 year of operations, it was acquired by a US company. Now he started his next cybersecurity startup called CSCC Labs Private Limited. Mr. Chandra, thank you so much. It's an honor to have you here. And with no further ado, I will give the floor to you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And it's my privilege to talk for next close to an hour. Let me share my screen. Okay. So good afternoon, good evening, based on the place where you logged in into this web conference. So what I will be doing is for next close to 30 to 40 minutes, I will take you through some of the concepts of the topic, which is the malware analysis and also the zero trusted kernel. I also included a couple of demos and show you the ways how typically we do malware analysis, and more importantly how we protect many organizations on a day-to-day basis. So just before, to keep it very simple, whenever we hear about any organization or any person got hacked, or the company got ransomware, or the system, I mean the data got breached, or things like that, ultimately what happens under the grounds is one of the system or systems, the entire network got infected with some kind of a malware. Typically the malware is nothing but a process in the system which is not actually what the user or the organization is intended to run. So malware is nothing superficial. It is simply one more process like your notepad or a browser or anything like that, just that it won't show up to the user, and it does similar functions like any other process in terms of accessing the files, accessing any other hardware controls, or do anything on the system. But the whole thing is, usually it is not an intended process. So what is a malware analysis? It's the whole process is basically to figure out what is that suspicious file running as a process, and what is a network connection or connections which are happening from that system to outside world. So I mean, there are multiple other things also can be part of the malware analysis, but the whole thing is we would like to figure out the severity of the whole incident, and figure out the hidden indicators of compromise specific to that particular incident, so that when we figure out the indicators, we will be able to key in those indicators in the protection softwares like firewall or antivirus or EDR solutions, so that the further damage can be prevented. So, and also the whole process of extracting the IOC itself is actually malware analysis. Okay. And what is the importance of malware analysis? Uh, so it is important because we wanted to stop the breach or the attack what is already happened or happening, so that the damage can be minimized. And if you look at the malware analysis market over the last few years, as per the region like North America, Europe, APAC, and EMEA, you can see it is increasing drastically, because the number of new malware samples which are fed into these sandbox or online analysis tools are increasing day by day. Um, that also shows that there is a tremendous amount of increase in new malwares coming into the market. And it is obvious because the systems are increasing and people are more dependent on the computers now, and each and every business is running on internet. So uh, there is a good amount of interest, or there is a lot of money there. So obviously the underground hackers are the researchers or the people who will be really interested, sometimes for whatever interest, they try to hack the systems. So what is the type of malware analysis? Typically, any person gets into the malware analysis team in any organization as an independent research analyst, or in any SOC or a NOC environment. Typically, they will be doing three type of analysis. One is called static analysis. Second is called dynamic. And third is called memory analysis. So usually the static analysis is something where the file which is suspicious will be given to the analyst, and he will be using multiple tools to analyze for the given particular file or email address or IP address, whatever it is, or a domain. So it is a static analysis. So when he's analyzing it, the process or the application is not running. So that's what is a static analysis. So a lot of information will come out of it. I will explain you by demos in a minute. uh, what is the dynamic analysis? Where the system is already infected with that particular malware, and that malware is actually showing up as a suspicious process. So when it is actually executed on the system, uh, we will be trying to collect a lot more information, because the true sense of that particular process is much more obvious when it is running, so that we can see what kind of network connections it is making, what kind of files it is accessing, what kind of registries it is touching, and many more things. So we try to understand and get a better rich experience or rich indicators of compromise in a dynamic analysis. And the memory analysis is again, we take a snapshot of the entire RAM, and then go ahead and analyze multiple other things using that RAM dump. So I mean, you can go ahead and if you just take these three simple words and search in the internet, you get a huge amount of material and techniques and processes how to do more of those things. But otherwise, in a nutshell, these are the three typical ways how any analyst will be doing. So before I proceed further on this, I would like to just show you what are the typical websites we use in a day-to-day basis to do these. Sorry. So one is called virustotal.com. This is one of the aggregator of all the antivirus softwares and EDR solutions uh, as a SaaS solution. This company currently owned by Google. And what they do is you can simply, uh, upload any file what you feel suspicious. And what it does is it basically sends that particular file to many more vendors. Let me just do one thing simply. I just downloaded a sample, and I uploaded that into this particular virustotal.com, and the file will be sent to multiple antivirus vendors, and see what those people uh, say about it, whether they can say it is detected or non-detected. Obviously this file is a password protected, a zip file, so that's why none of these people were able to detect anything. But otherwise, and if you look at the power of this particular website is, it will be able to give you it's kind of, you have 70 plus antiviruses running in your lab. So rather than you managing the latest signatures and latest updates, so these tools, you can use this service which is free in interactive way. If you really wanted to do more pokes through scripting, then you need to go for licensing. Otherwise, for R&D purposes and a single user, you can always use directly. And it also gives a lot more footprint about that given file in terms of the hashes and the type and what is the magic and then I mean what kind of file this is, even though many a times the extension can be not the really the one. So it try to understand the more MIME data and then explain you exactly what this is and what is the total size, and when is actually this particular file has been seen by VirusTotal, and lot many other contents, the metadata. And it also talks about any other relationships it has and where it's seen in terms of from which website it's seen being downloaded or things like that. Especially this will be good if it is a URL, IP address, or in those things you will see much more rich context here. And is there any community has said anything about it? So otherwise, in a nutshell, you can upload any file. It can be binary, a text, or the Word document, or anything like that, and it basically gives you some information. And also here you can give any URL. Let me just show you one thing. I go to um, fish tank. So this is one of the website where all the latest phishing links are being published. So let me take one of this URL which is currently there and just take it just for our understanding and then search. So again, it just goes and gives this URL to all those different URL scanners within their ecosystem. Example, Forcepoint is saying that it is suspicious, and other people looks like they don't have this specific URL yet in their database. So you can understand what is the type, it is HTML and blah blah, and lot many other details. So obviously it is just it might have been submitted few minutes back, that's why it is not been there in anybody's database yet. Okay, so this is one thing. And the second most important website typically we use is called any.run. Very good website, a very good online sandboxing kind of website. You can submit any type of file. What it does is, the previous one is kind of a static analysis. This is kind of a more dynamic analysis. What it does is it basically takes the file what you submitted and it actually run in a given operating system, one of the operating system. And in this case, and also it shows you all the screenshots of for a given time. You can see this basically they've opened the file, what happened, it asked for a password, then what happened, like that. It gives you the multiple screenshots of the specific execution which is going on the system, and then it shows what kind of HTTP responses were happening or observed during that specific execution, what connections happened to which IP address and what are they, and any DNS requests are happened, any threats are there. And also how is the process execution flow when this specific process or the file has been opened. The moment they open the Excel sheet, it also opened up a rundl32.exe, which is a typical fileless malware symptom. Typically people send you a Excel sheet or a document, they embed a lot of malwares in a macro, and typically those macros will contain the stage 1 malware, where it will be downloading the stage 2 malware or shell code from a remote system using these kind of processes, run DLL, PowerShell, Registry, things like that. So it's very, I mean, you can see clearly it downloaded, it is trying to load some DLL and call some function and things like that. I mean, it also gives you indicators of compromise. What is it? In this case, it downloaded something from this specific URL. Maybe this is a shell code in some kind of an encrypted format. The hacker might have been running it there, and then the run DLL basically downloaded it and trying to execute it. So it shows many other things. You can also take a sample of it if you want for your own thing. And if you wanted a process graph, it also gives how exactly it happened. I mean, in more visual format. So this is also one interesting website we use. And there are many other websites. You go and look at online sandboxing, or you can use your own Calibox. I'm sure you may heard about um, offensive security, who are basically the creators of Kali Linux box, which has hundreds of free infosec tools, including vulnerability assessment, pen testing, and forensic and incident analysis, whatever it is. You can straight away go, and they also, I mean, you can go ahead there and download the latest Kali. They also run the exploit DB, things like that. But anyways, I mean, so those are the few sources you can use to do your static analysis, dynamic analysis. Rather than yourself, you are using some of the tools which are available online. Okay, so it's very important. um, okay, now let me get into kernel. Let me switch the context to the kernel. I'll tell you why uh, I named it as a malware analysis and zero trusted kernel. So as most of you understand, in any operating system, kernel is the one which actually controls the entire operating system. That's where the, if you, I mean, if you're from computer science background, you really understand what is ring 0 to ring 3, and then how the kernel code space work and user space works. And in kernel, pretty much there is no context of the user. Everything is running at a system privilege and at the highest privileges, and it is having direct access to the hardware and many other things. So and the reason why I said kernel is if you can implement really the zero trust, the so-called zero trust, which is typically zero trust means you allow only what you want on the system. The rest all will be completely blocked, like a typical firewall. If you take any firewall, I mean, the way how it works is like that, right? You say what is the incoming traffic allowed with IP addresses, subnets, and port protocol, and the same way from inside to outside what is allowed. So you clearly define those rules, and the last rule is always deny all. So it means anything apart from this will be automatically get dropped if it is coming from outside or if it is going out from inside. So that way the security control is very deterministic and very clear. There is no scope for any type of suspiciousness. So that's where the kernel comes into picture. I'll tell you why. Because in any operating system, as we understood so far, malware is ultimately a process. It can run as an independent process, or it will run under one more process as a fileless malware. I mean, in the previous example, what we saw, RunDL32, which spawn out of Excel sheet. So ultimately, a process has to start, and in any operating system, if process has to start, I mean, the entire memory creation and everything has to happen from the kernel. So there are the most stealthiest and very difficult malwares I mean, so far is the kernel based malwares, because they're extremely hard to detect it, because they are low, they are completely running at a, not really on the user space level. They will be running as a drivers, they will be running at a kernel level, which are impossible to figure it out, because they can easily evade their traces to be detected by any user level space code if they want. Because many antivirus solutions, many EDR solutions, they try to collect a lot of information from the system at a user space level, and if some malware is running at a kernel level, very difficult to figure it out. So again, I don't want to spend too much time on it. It just for you to understand a little bit more on how the antiviruses works at kernel. They are signature based, and they are some of them do some interception to the APIs or some DLS what they're loading, and they do a lot of comparison and they do integrity checks. They have some basic information maybe in the registries at certain files. Typically, they are not supposed to be changed, and somebody is trying to change, or when those values get changed, these tools basically trigger some kind of alert, and again registry comparisons and all those stuff. So why kernel malware analysis? As I explained you previously, you will get a rich experience, first-hand information. You will be able to understand what kind of system calls are happening, how the malware is basically talking to its command and control. We typically call CNC. Basically, the one which is actually managing all these malwares, or the hacker where is sitting and trying to control your system. So things like that, you will get a much better rich experience when you do anything at kernel level. Okay. And again, this is also again for you to understand. Anyways, I have shared this presentation with all of you already. I mean, when you just have some time, just go through it and try to understand more. And but I wanted to spend a little bit more on demos going forward. Um okay, let me just quickly go back to one more important slide. Okay, before I move on to that slide, so why all these malwares? So the answer is very obvious many a times, but it is very important for us to understand that uh, somebody is interested about the data in the organization. It may be database, it may be a files, it may be some sensitive files in HR, finance, whatever it is. Ultimately, they want to steal the data through the exfiltration process. So and how we can find it out using network analysis, microsegmentation, and all those things. But the mottos of any hack or any malware is they wanted to steal data, they wanted to listen to the conversations, they wanted to activate the video and take some footprints, or they wanted to take some screenshots on the system, or they wanted to grab some passwords or cookies to do some kind of identity theft or spoofing, or they may be simply using your computer resources for their bot activities. Maybe they wanted to launch some DDoS attacks on any government or any bank, financial system, or some other services. So they simply use the machines as a bots to do what they wanted, because there are a lot of services in the hack forums or underground hackers sell for money, saying that if you want me to uh, generate, or I want, if you want me to just stop some service, maybe the stock market, they wanted to stop it. So they will create a huge DDoS attack through all these bots. So that may be one of the reason they want, maybe they use your machine for Bitcoin mining and many other things like that. So it's ultimately the motto can be something which they wanted, they have something which they wanted to extract from your computer, your network, or they wanted to use your computing resources for their own benefit. Okay. Maybe in the last thing, I mean, I seen in some of the forensic analysis, especially they wanted to implant some wrong data on the customer's environment, so that will also lead them into more legal problems. So because it's very difficult to figure out who is the owner of the data, because it is residing on their system, ultimately they becomes the owner. So okay. And so let us understand this slide a little uh, well, because ultimately, what is the root of any malware? As I explained so far, it is all about process. It is running as a separate process. Ultimately, process is nothing but a file. That is the number one symptom of any malware running on the system. And each process also, I'm not going to cover too much details of these things, but just to give you some understanding for you to go back and do research if you're interested more on this. uh, every process also loads a lot of DLLs, or we call as a modules, because a lot of functions which these processes may be using internally are maybe the system related processes. So that's where these DLLs gets loaded. Okay. So, and also sometimes these processes, we call, let us say there is a web application service running in a organization to serve the website or database or whatever it is. So sometimes what hackers will do is they try to figure out some way to hack into the system through that running process, which is actually listening on a port for that particular service, through buffer overflows, remote code executions, and drop chain attacks and things like that. And there is a very small degree of chance that if you download any free softwares or these Trojan horses, either on the mobiles or the systems, um, people always make a proper exe into a malware. Typically we call them as a Trojan horses. They implant the backdoor in those things. Example, if you go and download some WinZip from some non good sources, so there is a very high degree that that particular WinZip what you download or any other softwares, typically people download the cracked softwares or free softwares from non good websites. So typically they contain these things. So when you download it, the application actually works the way it is working, but also it opens up the door to the hacker silently. So ultimately, again, the whole thing is the heart of the whole malware is a process. The second thing is typically it's called fileless, very difficult to get identified. But the example what you've seen sometime back, when you open an Excel sheet, it actually ran some run DLL32. It is again typically they come as a fileless because the true malware is not really coming into the system directly and executing the info. I mean the shell code or the malware related code is running through a legitimate processes like run DLL, PowerShell, things like that. In Linux systems, curl, bash, whatever it is. So that's the second type. And also I was just telling about the kernel based stealthiest malwares, like they will be loaded as a drivers into the system, very difficult to detect. And again, the last one is many other ways are there, but this is some of things I'm just trying to keep it so that you can go back and do some more research. The hardware devices, typically they attach to the network or network devices or systems where the hardware devices can open the back doors to the hackers. So uh, if you want to understand more of these things, there are multiple courses are there. There is a pen tester academy. You can go ahead and look at some of the courses there, or you can go to MITRE, MITRE, which is the framework which is really one of the best source of understanding the entire attack chain framework. And the whole matrix is maintained today. Entire whole industry is following the MITRE framework now, so you can also go ahead and look into that. um, but let me get into this. Yeah, so as I said, we use different sources and tools like Kalibox and Virus Total website, any.run, and then MITRE, I just talked about it, and like hybrid analysis again, like any.run. And OS query, which is again, if somebody is interested in coding and all those things, if they want to collect a lot of rich information from the operating systems, you can go ahead and use this OS query agent to query the operating systems for data to get into your centralized database to do more threat hunting, and many things like that. And also if you are more techie and wanted to understand more, there is a application called Process Monitor by it's a part of the sys internals toolkit by Microsoft. You can also use that to do more analysis. I didn't mention here Kali Toolbox because that is the Linux based toolkit to do much more programming level, and a lot of hundreds of tools are there in that also. Okay, so this is where I want to spend some time, because obviously so far we understood malware and malware analysis is all about the art of finding the indicators of compromise or finding the suspicious processes, and understanding what exactly that particular file the root, from where that particular file came, how it came, and what kind of symptoms it has, so that you can convert them into rules at your firewall level or your other security tools. So we talked about static, dynamic, and memory level analysis, and so that itself is a huge subject. And so we also talked about what kind of sources you can use. So that is a one side of the story. The second side of the story is how we can really protect our systems and what is the solutions. So that's where the zero trust comes into the picture, and I will talk about it, and I will show you the example. And in fact, we just show one example, one tool example where this can be achieved. So typically the zero trust, as I mentioned, the name suggests, it is all about allowing only what is required at a granular levels, piece by piece. Example, process creation. What do maybe process creation? When you go to, let us say, let me open up this is my Windows system, and let us say if I click on this Acrobat Reader, so this application is running now. If you really look at um, the the task manager, if you see um, the application which I opened, let me open this. If I go to details, if you see, it is actually acro rd32.exe, this application. So if I right click and try to see properties, ultimately it is a file residing in this particular location. So you can see it in this particular folder. This is the acro rd32.exe. So, so as I said some time back also, every process is actually a file. And in this case, this is the binary file. Okay. And when you open this particular file, it also loads a lot of DLLs. I'm not showing it. If you use process monitor or process explorer tools, part of this internal tools, you'll understand more of them. But our goal is not to get into that more. I mean, but ultimately what I'm saying is I clicked on Chrome. So it's an application again, chrome.exe and things like that. If I click on notepad, any text file basically opens through a notepad.exe, because that is a default binary which is attached to these extensions. Okay. So the first thing is control the process creation at the kernel level. It means if only the approved applications will be allowed to run on your system, like the way how we just talked about the firewall, how it allows only what is allowed from the outside and allows only what is required from inside to outside at a IP address level, protocol and port level. The same way, if we can implement, this is typically called as also as a whitelisting solutions, whitelist and blacklist kind of, that is very little old names, but ultimately it all talks about implementing a robust control at a kernel level to allow only what is the required processes. So in this system, we already have a specific software which is running on the system. It doesn't allow any other new application which is not authorized. So I will show you how is authorized and all those things basically show up in our policy. Example, I downloaded, okay, let me go to my downloads. If I go to my downloads and let us say if I try to, I mean, maybe I try to double click on command copy.exe. It doesn't work because this is unauthorized. I'll show you how these alerts will come and all those things. But anything I download in this system, it doesn't work. And not only that, any other unauthorized applications which are not been approved so far, they also don't work. Okay, so this is fundamentally the best way to control, because we are clearly putting a limitation on what to run, what not to run. Because we don't need antivirus those times, because ultimately we are not running everything and try to analyze something. We are simply only allowing what is required. But the problem with that approach is how we can control those examples what I showed you some time back. I opened up an Excel sheet or a document, and the document has the macros, and inside those macros there are a lot of fileless malware attack types are there. Typically in last 5 years, and you will continue to see every year, I mean every month we are seeing a tremendous amount of increase in these fileless malwares, because uh, they are not really downloading the file and running as a new process. They are using a system allowed process like run DLL, PowerShell, things like that. And in that particular context, they are doing something malicious. So for that, we need to implement something called process context control. So typically we call this as a rule rings in this specific example of the tool what I'm talking about. But they are also really um, come in handy, because if you just only say a process is allowed or not, sometimes that will give you a lot of restrictions. You wanted some process to run in one context, in not another context. How to really stop them? Let me show you a simple example. I opened up the command prompt. I typed PowerShell here. It runs. You can see the PowerShell ran, and you can see everything is working. Now I open up the browser, and now I go to the downloads and I click on the cmd.exe. So the difference between this specific, let me keep all these two side by side. The left hand side one is the one which I click directly from my Explorer, and this command prompt is basically running under the context of Chrome browser, but in a visual way. So in an attack perspective, you don't see this specific window at all. If the Chrome browser has any zero-day exploit, hackers will use that specific vulnerability to run command prompt or PowerShell, things like that hidden, so that you don't see all these things. But let us say there is a zero-day exploit available in Chrome browser now, and a hacker is somehow able to get the handle and able to run command prompt. Now he wanted to run PowerShell, because ultimately through PowerShell he can do lot many things. And this is heavily used one for running fileless malwares. The moment he runs it, it won't run here. If you see it in this, in the left hand side context, I run the PowerShell, it runs, no issues. But here it doesn't run, because the software which is running at the kernel level has the ability to understand how to control the allowed process PowerShell in one context and not in other contexts. So that is, if your software or the kind of protections tool you are using has this kind of abilities, it will be really good. So that is second way of implementing it. Third is network control. So typically the network control is, we generally say it as a firewall. But the problem with the firewalls is when you implement firewalls at a system level. So there are a lot of micro segmentation products coming into the market now. They are saying that we will remove the perimeter firewall and move the firewall from the perimeter to the system level, because people start working from homes and they are no more going to the office network. They are typically getting connected through VPNs, and they have split tunnels. So that's one traffic, some traffic can directly go to their office, some traffic can directly hit the internet. So implementing firewall at a system level is good to certain extent. But the true implementation of the network control is taking that firewall to the process level. So what do I mean by that? You can say that, again, example, let me show you an example. So here PowerShell is allowed, and here it is my Chrome browser. If I say google.com here, so it comes here, no problem. But same google.com, if I try to open through PowerShell using, let us say, invoke web request, that is one of the function I can use. Let us see what happens. If you see, it came and this process got killed. You can see the PS is gone and command prompt came. So there is a process level blocking in the system, which process can make network connections to what level. So that is a third level of zero trust, really good to control at a process level. Okay, and then the next one is called process to data. If you see, this is about applying the zero trust really on the systems, from process creation to process context to the process to network, and then process to data, because that's also very important. uh, because as we understand, any hacker is really behind the data now, right? So the moment uh, whatever is the data which is feels to be important for you, you should only allow certain processes should be able to access that particular data. Because typically in our organizations, in any company, people do this kind of data access control at a user privilege level. User privilege level is good, but it is also important. You don't want your PDF documents to be opened by some malware.exe or a PowerShell.exe. You wanted PDF documents to be opened by acro rd32.exe. Okay, Excel files only by Microsoft Excel application maybe. So that way, or any of our proprietary applications, data sources will be only accessed by your proprietary applications. Maybe the sensitive data is inside it. You don't want anybody to go and open that specific folder or a data. So it is very, very good and good idea to basically do control from process to data. Okay. Um, let me just show you that example now. If you see the sample.pdf, I clicked on it, you see this document got opened, because the moment I click on the PDF extensions, that the file will be passed on as an argument to the Acro RD32, which is Adobe Acrobat Reader. So in Windows. So that's a default application. Now suppose if I open this same application, open with Notepad, let us see what happens. I mean, in this case, Notepad is not a malware, but it's an allowed application because I'm not allowing any other application anyways, but Notepad is allowed. But typically, Notepad can open any application. Maybe you will not be able to see the format because the format of the PDF is different and only the Adobe Acrobat Reader can read it. Let us see what happens in this case. You can see access is denied. So that way, any new malware runs on the system, this specific control of process to data will be automatically gets applied and it won't allow them to open this sensitive data, whatever it is. So that's the fourth. And then you can go ahead and implement the read write executable controls for the USB and hardware drives. And uh, like that, you can go to as much level as possible. And the reason I'm talking about all these things, these are some of the controls we have developed in our previous product, which we sold it to some other company. I mean, the zero trust truly means today, I mean, it is still evolved. There are not many vendors are doing this thing because still a lot of vendors are at a signature based or threat hunting model, or they're trying to take a lot of logs and try to do a post-mortem or a reactive approach. But obviously, we all understand true security is all about stopping in the first place itself, rather than letting it happen and then analyze it and then try to find out the indicators of compromise and then try to go in a reactive approach. Reactive approach always is costly and also difficult to implement and prone to a big problems, because you understand, nowadays I don't have to really find my systems got hacked, especially if it is a ransomware attack. The malware will run and encrypt all my system files, and it itself will say that I mean, the system is compromised, now you pay the bitcoins. So we don't have to do any analysis to find the system is already compromised or not. So the damage has already happened. So the best way to control is let not the damage to happen by using those five uh, zero trust controls I just mentioned so far. I mean, if you look at NIST guidelines, you will see this definition also getting more and more clarity day by day. But what I explained to you is still yet to be coming to the market, and maybe next 5 years you will see this is exactly what everybody starts talking about. Okay, and the last but not the least, very important. Okay, I mean, all these things you are enforcing through a product and all those things, but the point is, uh, really, uh, do you really secure the main process which is controlling the system itself? That's very, very, very important, because many a times uh, there is a possibility that internal administrator himself turned back as a bad vector, intentionally or unintentionally. So let me go back to this again and open my task manager. Let me show you the process which is actually controlling all these things what I showed you so far. It's called Xprotect. If I try to, the hacker understands or administrator understands that this is the process which is actually controlling the system, and I would like to stop this particular service or a process. If he tries to go ahead and try to kill it, we should not allow it. So we should also keep a decent amount of controls to do self protect of the security service itself. And sometimes the vendors miss on it. Why I'm telling this point is, in Windows, administrator is a super user. In Linux systems, root user ID 0 is the super user. They can typically do anything. But however, if you implement certain things at the kernel level, in the kernel level, there is no user ID, there is no administrator, right? Everything is basically application and it just processes the APIs and things like that. So you will be able to implement to a certain level of more control and making sure the main service which is actually protecting the system is not really getting compromised or getting stopped straight away. So you can, whenever somebody tries like this, you can get an alert. Or if I go back to the service now and try to go and let us say Xprotect service, now I wanted to go here and try to stop this service, it doesn't allow it. So basically we have done something in the kernel, make sure, because when you do these things, typically the system, Windows operating system core APIs gets called, and we are hooking into it, and we are basically denying certain things and dropping that API call by any other process in the system by being in the queue. So is it foolproof 100%? No, but definitely it will protect the main service to certain extent. But if somebody is administrator, I mean, they can try to damage the system by booting into a single user mode, things like that. Okay, now let me show you quickly before um, we get into some more questions, and then talk something which you have questions on. But I would like to show, um, this is the dashboard what I've been showing so far. Whatever was happening in terms of, we tried to open some command copy application 13 minutes back, and it didn't work. And you can see who is the user. If I click on it, it shows who is the user, and then why it didn't run, because it's not in whitelist, and things like that. And also later we went ahead and tried to run PowerShell um, from a Chrome command prompt. You can see here, it actually gave an alert. Not only that it denied at the first place, but also it gave the complete symptoms as an alert back to your dashboard, so that your analyst can get a rich experience, a rich data to do further analysis whatsoever. So okay, we clearly show it, and things like that. I mean, if I wanted to understand what is this rule, I can go to this rule, and then specifically it clearly talks about, if the parent process is Chrome, we wanted to deny PowerShell to happen. So there is a certain rule which is basically controlling. So there are multiple rules are there in this specific policy. So this is the product which we developed and sold it to a company called Color Tokens. And if you go to colortokens.com, you will see XProtect, and you understand it better. And there are many other vendors. You can go ahead and look at it. There are a lot of EDR vendors like CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, and all, but everybody does security in different way. But the true way of zero trust is not just at a network level. It has to go to the process context, process to data, and then process to network. I mean, that's where I would like to show you this. And I think we are at a juncture where I would like to stop talking and let me look into the questions, and try to answer some of your questions. Do torrenting gives rise to viruses, or it is just a bluff? See, torrenting, BitTorrent, and the typical see, torrenting is all about peer-to-peer sharing, right? So by default, torrenting definitely will not give virus at all. That is definitely not the right. BitTorrent, and all these different applications which are there, they're all basically meant for peer-to-peer sharing. They don't bring viruses. However, the torrent, to download the torrent link, you will be going to multiple other websites. Example, you wanted to download the latest movie, or you wanted to download some series, because the torrent application itself is not bad. But however, to download that torrent link, you go to some websites and try to download those links. And in those websites, they try to trick you to download some applications which are typically maybe malwares. But otherwise, torrent itself is not definitely not bad. And then if we see some abnormality in the functioning of our system, and we understand that our system is infected with worms, then how shall we remove it from root? Okay, when you say root, means maybe you are using Ubuntu or whatever it is, or if it is Windows administrator. So typically your system, okay, let me tell you one more thing. It is a olden days. When I say olden days, means couple of years back, where the system is not really fast, suddenly became slow, it start flickering. All those are the symptoms of the viruses. But nowadays, if you really see, uh, I mean, if your system gets compromised, definitely no hacker wanted to let you know by consuming your CPU and all those things, unless he's running some Bitcoin mining and all those things. So you will see some visible system becoming slow and all those things. Typically, there are multiple tools available from multiple vendors to do. You go to Bitdefender and all those websites, System Clean, and all those things are available. But if you are yourself is an analyzer, you can analyze through the tools what I just said, like Process Monitor and all those things. There are multiple ways to analyze yourself, as long as you are able to figure out that particular application. Because typically what happens is when your system gets compromised, they try to do persistence. What do persistence means? When your system gets rebooted, still the malware will run. So they have multiple ways to persist the malware in your system to run by keeping some entries in the registry, a startup folder, some DLL hooks, or I mean, there are multiple ways. So if you can figure that out by a tool or manual way, and if you remove those things, then your system is safe. But generally, your system is slow is not 90% of the times or 80% of the times is not compromised. That is due to maybe your Chrome browser, you open multiple tabs, maybe you are running some other application which is really consuming the CPU. You can go ahead and see it. You can use Task Manager, and you can look at who is the person using maximum CPUs and memory. You can know, right? I mean, this itself will give you good amount of understanding. And I can simply, I mean, I'll just show you as I keep opening more and more tabs. You will see the Chrome will let me just show you here. See, you can if you see Chrome itself is taking 36 MB RAM and then 16 MB RAM. There's so multiple processes of Chrome is running. Each of this is taking more than 10 MB RAM. And sometimes if you're running a YouTube and it has a lot of cache, the memory gets increased. So you can simply see it and right click and kill it. So that is one simplest way. But if it looks suspicious, again, you can right click on it and go to file location and upload this to VirusTotal. So some techniques what we just talked about in this session. Um, then what else is this? Kaustubh Chaudhary. I worked on developing a Stego malware. The VirusTotal was not able to detect my malware. So is VirusTotal is reliable? What happens is you might have created one sample using either C, C++ or Python. You compiled, or you might have used Metasploit, MSF, maybe many other tools are available in the, in Kali box also to create your own payloads. Typically, if the payload is new and if nobody has submitted to VirusTotal, because they're all signature based detections, you may not see VirusTotal as detecting it. Is VirusTotal is completely reliable? Not 100%. But if VirusTotal, when you upload your sample for the first time, if the sample is coming as a first time itself, then what you need to do is you may not see that as a suspicious as a virus because they themselves got it first time. Definitely VirusTotal will basically give your sample to those vendors end of the day or in a frequent intervals. That's the type they have, right? And then they do, obviously their analyst will do a static analysis, dynamic analysis, and it will get updated very soon, maybe in a day or so. But if your sample is gone to the VirusTotal and if it is not been there, typically you can use like any.run and all those things. We talked about the dynamic analysis, right? You will be able to figure it out. But if you're asking me this from the hacker's perspective, you may be stealthy for some more time, but sooner or later you will get compromised because the moment you give your sample to VirusTotal, your sample is already gone. I mean, quickly they will get into it, but you will be okay for some more time. But if the system is already like the way I explained, process level control is there, your exe will not run anyways. Doesn't matter whether you have system administrator privileges and all. Okay, the next one. What if the signature of the malware is unique and not identified by any antivirus? After that, how could you know and identify such suspicious activity? Yes, again, yeah, it is not easy. That's where we use if you go ahead and do a little bit more research on the process monitor and understand, there are multiple ways to do it, because which process is basically doing more data transfer, which process is touching more registries, more files. Malware cannot simply sit idle, right? It may be doing some kind of a beaconing every, if it is connected to CNC server, yeah, it may not do a tremendous amount of network traffic, but it will be doing certain amount of heartbeat on a given interval. So there are multiple ways the analysts will be figuring out, and that is entire thing. It's a huge course. How to extract the indicators of compromise itself is a huge course on the malware analysis. um, yeah, and antivirus didn't detect doesn't mean that it is not there. I mean, that's the reason you see that slowly the antivirus companies are converting into EDR companies, right? EDR companies is basically, rather than purely depend on the signature based, they collect all that information, process creation, registry callbacks, file IO callbacks, network information to a centralized console, and then they try to understand and see the abnormalities by stitching all that information. Um, that's the thing. What is the use of malware to good guy, white hat hacker? What are the advantages of creating malware? Um, okay, for if you are a malware analyst, it is always good to create your own malwares using multiple tools or your own tool. There are multiple ways you can create. I mean, see, ultimately malware is a program, as I explained, right? It is a piece of code which is written and doing something which is not intended by the user or the company. So you can always create a program. Even Chrome itself, I mean, because Chrome is visible and that's what it is doing, it is fine. But the same Chrome browser, if you see other way, it also takes all your keystrokes. It also takes I mean, it has access to your file system, it has access to your mic, all those things. But the way how that is implemented is like we are using Zoom. It is also having access to everything, but it is through my permissions and only when I wanted it. But if you create yourself, you will at least know how the hacker will create it, and you will basically try to create your own samples and see how stealthy your malware, how unique your malware. In those ways, it may be useful, definitely for sure. Does your color token solution has the functionality of DRM solution, like not allowing user to download the file or so on? No, we don't do that at this moment. But yeah, there is one more product called X Shield in the same company, which is developed by that company itself. They do a little bit of more user level network control. So kind of answers some of your question what you are saying. But the true way of allowing, and these things are best done by the proxies, where the user level control will be there at a given IP address or a domain level. So but yeah, we do not have truly there, because very difficult, because if you allow Chrome and if you allow some network traffic, then any user can do it. But we are coming up with those things. That's our next. We can end the task from task manager by identifying the suspicious names of the process. But what if the malware process is named like Explorer Win32? Yeah, exactly. So that's a good question. By the way, yes, many malwares uses the legitimate name like svchost.exe and services.exe, things like. But again, you can clearly see that. I mean, as I explained some time back, I mean, if you look at here, it may show like this. But if you open Process Explorer, or if you look at the file location, you will see it is not coming from the legitimate path. So, or if you look at the file properties, you will see it is not from the Microsoft. If you look at the details, I mean, those are the ways to figure it out manually. The location is different, the file name is same. But again, if you use the controls, what I said, these things are not possible. Example, you can see in this you can see consent chrome.exe is running. So now I rename this uh, thing to Chrome. It is running now, right? Simply. But now let us see. I didn't create rule for this, but I created for SVC host. SVC host also is one of the running process in the system. If you look at it here, SVC host is many processes. If I try to click on it, it doesn't run, because there was a rule I created that even though this process can run with this file name, only from certain path it can run. It cannot run from all the paths. That's why if you go ahead and look at the alert will clearly show you that it is not in the allowed path. I mean, if you see, it is in the blacklist path. But if we just go here, I created a rule that only from these two places it is excluded. Any other place it comes, it doesn't run. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so let's move on. We can end that. Okay. Over. Any.run is able to take snapshots. Then how about the sensitive data? Does it capture that too? No, it is basically about when you do this runtime malware analysis, so-called sandboxing. They are just providing a lot of operating systems. When the specific sample what you submitted to them, when it is running, they just take certain snapshots, especially when they see a different screens. I mean, it just to give you some more real-time experience. Otherwise, they can't show you the data transfers and all those things. But they do mention, as I showed you previously, what is the network traffic, which IP address, which port, how much data gone, all those things they will show. But they don't do like what. If you wanted to know this, you have to use Wireshark kind of tools to do network analysis more. Okay.
Mr. Chandra, our time is almost up. There is 1 minute left.
Yeah.
As I
So
saw,
what I
you
will do
took
is
up to answer the questions yourself. If you want to pick up maybe two more questions before we finish.
perfect. So what I will do is rather than I can see most of the questions are kind of I mean good. What I can do is maybe they will be able to figure out these questions themselves in the internet. But if they were not able to figure out, my recommendation is I have given my email address. You can please send a mail to me. I'm happy to answer them. And if it is whatever purpose, education purpose or business purpose, I'm happy to answer because the time is less. But our goal is today is to talk about and introduce an approach how to really secure our systems, and also on the opposite side how to analyze systems. And I think it's just an introduction. Within few minutes we cannot really cover the depth, but I think there are a lot of questions are there. I will maybe I'll take it later and come back. But I think yeah, I think the time is up, and thanks a lot for this opportunity. And I really enjoyed, and I always enjoy talking to people and share my experience from many years.